Welcome to the Actually You Can podcast. I'm Miff Galloway, a performance coach passionate about supporting ambitious and high-performing women just like you who know they have untapped potential just waiting to be unleashed. If you're looking to massively up-level your performance in all areas of life, you've come to the right place. My goal on this podcast is to take you beneath the surface so you can connect with yourself on a deeper level while providing you with valuable insights and the tools necessary to navigate life's challenges and go after your goals with strength, clarity, and wisdom. If you're ready to uncover the truth which lies underneath so you can recognize your powerful feminine leadership style, pursue your goals unapologetically, and thrive in every aspect of your life, hit the follow button and get ready to explore the incredible possibilities that lie within you. Together, we'll uncover your next steps in achieving peak performance, because actually, you can. Welcome back to another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I'm your host, Miff, and today I'm joined by Brandon Day, neuroperformance coach and creator of the Neuro method. Brandon helps high-achieving athletes and professionals eliminate chronic pain and access their most powerful state of being, which is that of flow. With a background in applied neurology and flow science, he teaches people how to train their nervous system, not just their body or mind, so they can perform at their peak without burning out. So if you've ever felt stuck in stress, pain, or overdrive, this episode is your permission slip to move differently. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Brandon. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Miff. So glad to be here.
This is a very niche topic. And so I'd love to know what first drew you to applied neurology and flow states. Was there like a turning point or personal experience behind it? Let's hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. So there was a few, but it kind of boils down to selfish interests. I had played American football for many years and throughout university, and that, while it was a very incredible experience and an amazing career, and we won some national championships, I even made it on the cover of Sports Illustrated, right? Crazy stuff. It left me afterwards with a lot of chronic pain, and I smacked my head around quite a lot, right? And over the years, I started to get a little bit worse and worse over time, and the traditional methods were just not doing it for me. The physical therapy, the chiropractic, massage, and all the other modalities that I refer to now, and us in the neuro world refer to as below the neck modalities, were helpful in a short term, but the pain would always come back. And I was starting to notice that my brain and my mental health also were starting to get a little wonky, maybe the right word.
Yeah.
And so, from early on after college, I started searching for ways to heal my body first, because that's kind of where I came from and what I knew. And so through that, I ended up going back and getting a master's degree in kinesiology and working in physical therapy and trying to figure out those traditional methods to help myself. And, eventually that became a career, and I wanted to help others do the same. And one specific moment actually sticks out pretty good in that journey when I was a personal trainer, my first job, first week on the job. I didn't even have a certificate at this point. So don't tell anybody. Okay. I go in and my manager hands me this client. He says, "This is so-and-so. He's your new client. By the way, he was just diagnosed with Parkinson's disease." Oh, okay.
Buckle up.
Buckle up is right. I'm like, I felt really overwhelmed in the moment. And the self-doubt started to creep in. And I said to him, "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know anything about Parkinson's. What if I screw this up?" Right. And he looked at me and he kind of cocked his head and he goes, "You're fine. Just help him work out. What's the worst that could happen?" And thinking back now, everything that I know is like, well, over whatever else. But really in that moment, that mindset shift was what I needed. It was like, listen, you're going to help this guy. you're at very low risk of causing harm, right? He just wants someone there to help him through this time. And so I did. And we had great success together. He got off his medication within a few weeks and his symptoms greatly improved. Even got to go back to work and all this stuff. He was a veterinarian. It was wonderful for him and his family. And it was like that moment where I was like, okay, this could be really a profession for me. And I really enjoy helping people in this way. So it started out selfishly, but through that, I started helping people and I really grew a big passion for it. And along that journey, I was still struggling with getting results for myself and my clients. Doing okay. I went back and got a master's degree, doing all the traditional methods. I got so many letters after my name. It's just like ridiculous at this point. And what did they do but, make me a little bit better at my job, but there was still a big piece missing. So two things happened on that journey. About 5 years in, I discovered a book by a guy named Stephen Kotler, and it was called The Rise of Superman. And that book talks about action adventure sport athletes and how they were making these impossible feats seem easy. And then the exponential increases in the performance. For instance, do you know anything about motocross, motorcycles?
Yeah.
So the first backflip ever, right? After 80 years of motocrossing, freestyle motocross, the first backflip ever happens in the late 90s or something. I don't remember exactly when. But then within a few months, somebody does a double backflip. Like how, in a linear progression, that should not happen. It should have taken another 50 years. And this was happening all the time in those sports. And so that book is all about how this happens. And shortcut, it's flow states. The altered state of consciousness where our performance is hugely increased. And we're kind of out of our head and in our body and letting instinct take over, and every action flows seamlessly to the next. That unlocked a whole new paradigm shift for me, because I realized in that moment that a lot of my mental health struggles, a lot of my crisis of identity, and everything that happened to me after I left athletics was in a huge part related to the loss of access to flow. When I lost that access, everything started to degrade. And I just wasn't aware of it until that moment. So that was a huge shift for me. And I really dedicated my life thereafter to finding flow in my life and then, helping others do the same. So that was a huge moment. And then a few years later, I'm still on this path of trying to heal my chronic pain and help my brain to heal and to perform better, doing all the traditional things with some success, right? I don't know the exact numbers in physical therapy or traditional modalities, but it's not great as far as like the success rate. And it was after the pandemic, actually, when I started my online business, I came across this company called Next Level Neuro, and they were doing, so kind of serendipitous how it happened. They were, I am a reverend and I perform wedding ceremonies.
Cool.
It's fun.
Yeah.
So I was actually marrying my brother and his now wife, and she's from Germany, and she is a neurotrainer, which I didn't know what that was. She moved here from Germany to study under her mentors here that had this applied neurological training company. She introduced me to them, and they were there to film the wedding to stream it back to her family in Germany. So we were in very close contact. We got to talking. They're like, hey, we're doing this applied neurology mentorship. You'd be a perfect fit. Would you like to check it out? It starts next week. I was like, oh, that's convenient. Yeah.
Too convenient.
Yeah, very serendipitous. Synchronicities are all around us, right? And I made it my mission in life to try to pay more attention to them. And because they've done nothing but amazing things as far as opportunities and my own like flow of life. So anyway, it was one of those moments. Like, this is too good to be true. This is like, there's no coincidences, right? Like, they're here for a reason. You're here at the same time. It was a no brainer for me. Take on that new education. And I tell you what, Miff, within like a month of practicing applied neurological training, my chronic pain was gone. And this is at this point, probably at least 15, 16 years of chronic neck and back pain. That was debilitating. It really affected, chronic pain affects your mindset so much. It's really hard to do anything and to think about the future and plan for things. And it really affected my life a lot. And for it to happen that quickly, for it to go away, was another one of those like earth shattering moments for me. It was like, wow, this is the shit. So I'm just going to go full bore into this. And so now I'm one of their lead instructors, and I teach that mentorship to coaches and trainers and chiropractors and PTs. And I married that applied neurological training, neuro training, we call it, with flow state coaching, which is neuroflow method. And so the whole idea is, let's get athletes out of pain so that they can chase flow. So, you know, there's a few more moments in there that were pretty wild, but those are like the big highlights of what brought me from there to here.
Man, I love the stories of transformation like what you just shared. They just really fire me up. And I remember, I mean, I feel like there's lots of motivational quotes I could just pull out of what you're saying, but you really inspired one that I read recently that was all around purpose. And it was, your purpose, yes, is useful for you, but what is really purposeful about your purpose is sharing it with others and the impact it has on others. And it really, and you said your initial pursuit, it was selfish, but holy hell, having those life-changing moments that you're sharing with others and facilitating for others, like that's what it's all about. It really sounds like you found your purpose in this field. And
Right.
so for those playing along at home, I feel like we just need to probably clarify what is neurotraining and flow state before we dive into more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So neurotraining is the practical application of neuroscience principles for relieving chronic pain and increasing performance. That's the tagline, right? But what it really is using the intentional and repetitive training of the nervous system and the brain to beat pain and increase performance. So an example would be someone has pain in their knee. Okay. So most traditional methods would go to the knee.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? Let's move the knee around. Let's see if there's any biomechanical or structural problems in there. Is there a muscle imbalance that we need to deal with? Something like that. Neurotraining takes a different approach, and it follows this applied neurological loop, okay, is what we call it. But it's a very simple loop of how the brain works. So the brain takes in information from the environment through the nervous system, right? Those are called inputs. Then the brain interprets those inputs, and based on that interpretation, right, it's going to land somewhere on the spectrum of survival or performance, right? So if the brain interprets those inputs as a threat to our survival, then we get an output that is going to be more protective in nature. Okay, so it's input, interpret, output. That's the loop. It's always happening all the time. So in the knee pain example, instead of going at the local tissues and seeing if there's a structural problem with applied neurology or neurotraining, we actually take a step back, and instead of looking at the output, which is pain, we try to change the inputs so that we get a lower amount of threat in the system so that the brain no longer gives us pain as an output. So in that sense, the great thing about neurotraining is that anything can affect anything. And one perfect example is that if I have right knee pain, the first thing I would do as a neurotrainer is I would go and I would move the left elbow of that person, which will, on average, give them a 50% reduction in pain in that right knee. And the reason that works is because of the nervous system connections between the opposing joints.
Yeah.
because of how our gait mechanics work, how we walk. We are contralateral bipedal humans, right?
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen a baby, right, learning to walk, you don't have to tell them how to do it. They don't learn how to walk necessarily. They just do it.
Yeah.
It's because those programs are kind of hardwired into our nervous system, right? They're kind of like software programs that are loaded onto your computer when it shows up at your door, right?
Yeah.
And so through that, there's like spinal cord reflexes that happen and something called central pattern generators, kind of like swallowing is another example. You initiate the movement and then your brain takes over, right? So because of all those connections and how the opposing joints are connected, they communicate with each other. So when I move this elbow over here, that's actually sending signals by way of the nervous system to that other knee. And in a more global sense, telling the brain, hey, we are more safe when I activate this part of my body.
Yeah.
And that gets rid of the output of pain. So that's just one example of so many. Like we could go to the visual system and have them move their eyes around a little bit. And if there's threat coming from that system and we remove that, less pain is the output. So neurotraining in a nutshell is really just assessing and then intentionally training different areas of the brain through the nervous system to modulate this level of threat in the system. When we want to talk about like nervous system regulation, which is kind of like buzzword of the day.
Yeah. I definitely wanted to go there. Oh.
Neurotraining is the ideal way to do that, right? But it's really all about this modulation of threat. And when we get into the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic system or fight or flight system, and then the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest kind of system. Nervous system regulation is really just about tuning up and down those dials using the sensory input systems. Right? It's such a buzzy word around, and there's all these different modalities that are claiming to be nervous system regulation tools, and a lot of them are, but they're just small slivers of what's possible from a holistic applied neurological perspective. Right? They're just like little pieces of the pie. Take the vagus nerve, for example.
Yeah.
The vagus nerve stuff that's out there in the world these days is great, but it's not everything. It's one small piece. That's one nerve. It's a big nerve. Don't get me wrong. It connects a lot of things. And it's very important. But just in the brainstem itself, it lives in one part in the lower brainstem, and there are 11 other cranial nerves that could have a big effect on this autonomic nervous system balance. So this nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
So the vagus nerve is a great one, but it's not everything. It's not the be all end all. It's a really small piece of the whole system. Neurotraining, like true neurotraining, is taking everything into account and using something like the vagus nerve as just one tool in a big toolbox. Yeah. So that's like a long-winded explanation of neurotraining. Holy cow. But hopefully that came across as like digestible.
100%. And for me personally, you pulled together a lot of things that I've read or that I've heard. And I'm going to take this on a personal side quest real quick.
Yeah.
Because something that I hear about a lot on social media at the moment as well is that physical symptoms are like a manifestation of something, like whether it's a past trauma or something like that. So for example, if I have right knee pain or something, I always get it confused. It's a challenge that I'm having with my masculine energy or something like that. And so I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that approach, like what you just mentioned in terms of, like I've been fortunate enough to work with kinesiologists before, and I love that style of work, and it works really well for me. And it makes a lot of sense to me talking about the different slings in the body and how things interact. One thing that I kind of haven't made sense of for me personally is this sort of the physical manifestation of stored traumas in the body. And I'm not sure if it's something like Wi-Fi. Like I don't need to understand how my Wi-Fi works to know that I have working internet. And so do I just go, cool, it's a thing. I don't really need to understand exactly how it happened. But given that you've offered such clarity in terms of some other things that were outstanding. I'm keen to hear your perspective on physical manifestations of trauma.
Okay. Yeah, this is a big topic, especially right now, but um it's a really good one. So I'm actually gonna plug some uh, other people in the space for this one too, for more resources, because there's a podcast actually called Trauma Rewired, that I highly recommend, that is run by a couple of wonderful women that one of them is the founder of a like education company called Neurosomatic Intelligence. And um, it's a great neuro-informed practice. All my coaches out there that want to be more trauma informed from a neuro perspective, that's the place to be. So they don't pay me to say it, and they're just great. Okay. So anyway, that's a great resource. The trauma that manifests itself physically is definitely a real thing, right? For a long time, it's been kind of considered a little woo-woo pseudoscience type stuff, but we see that in a lot of different ways that are very much nervous system contributors. So I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe this, but the simplest way is like when you have an event that happens to you. Okay, I'm gonna use this classic example. So this works for trauma or for physical pain. They're kind of processed in the same way, right? Yeah. So let's use the neurotag explanation. So let's say you, Miff, are sitting in a park and it's a nice sunny day. It's not a cloud in the sky. There's a slight breeze and you're sitting under a big oak tree and you're eating a delicious ham sandwich. If ham's not your style, maybe it's tuna fish. I don't know. What's
Love a good ham sandwich, ham and cheese.
your perfect? All of a sudden, you start to hear this buzzing coming up behind you, and then bam, you get stung on the ear by a bee. Ow, that hurts. Okay, your ear swells up, and you got to take a little Benadryl because you're kind of allergic, maybe. No. Okay, so what happens then is you create what's called a neurotag, and it's a specific pattern of brain activation that like gets stamped into your brain like a fingerprint. Okay. Now, in like trauma, like a big T trauma or even little T trauma, this is more like a little T trauma, right? Big T trauma is just more impactful. It's more salient, the experience. It's more intense. So it's like a larger neurotag tag. It's got more weight to it, and things with more weight move faster and they get triggered easier. So you get stung by this bee, you create this neurotag, and so every sensory experience in that moment gets laid down in that neurotag, the like pattern of activation. That's why it's very unique. And so you can re-trigger that experience and that neurotag in certain conditions, right? And so the next time you're in that same park, you're sitting under that oak tree again, but now it's a cloudy day and there's no breeze. And then you hear this buzzing from the other side. You look over, you're kind of like I'm not too sure about this, but it's not enough to really trigger the whole kind of like flashback scenario or for a pain to manifest itself as an output from that neurotag and that increase in threat. Okay, so let's say a few days later, you're back in that park again. Now it's a sunny day and I'm under the oak tree again. And that light little breeze comes on. And what do you know? I got a ham sandwich again. And so the taste of the ham, the sensory, the warmth of the sun, the breeze on your skin, and then the sound is enough to reach the threshold where it triggers that like reliving of that experience or that pain to happen again. So that's one way that trauma gets stored in the brain, and then it can manifest in different areas of the body. And now there's lots of modalities and ways of thinking out there that connect different areas of the body. Like your liver's most active at 1 to 2 a.m. So if you're waking up at that time, it's a liver issue. And there's some validity to those things. They all have an underlying nervous system component to them, for sure. But as far as like the trauma manifestation and physical symptoms, the neurotag example, and then the past history around that person's specific structural body issues and nervous system issues would also give us more clues. I personally am not that familiar with some of those ideas, as far as like, if my right knee hurts, my masculine energy is off. I don't know about that. Maybe. We might be able to make a case for it, and I'm sure, whoever is teaching that has made a case for it, and it's probably pretty logical. As far as like actually tracing back pathways in the nervous system to masculine energy centers like in the brain or anything, that I'm not too familiar with. But anecdotal evidence, in my opinion, is not to be dismissed out of hand. And at the end of the day, what really matters is what you believe and what action then you take because of that. So if you believe it is your lack of feminine energy that is causing you pain in your left knee, then maybe you go work on your feminine energy. And maybe you go take some tango classes and, talk to your therapist and get into that a little bit, right? Is that going to cure your knee pain? I don't know. But it's going to make your mental health better, probably. It's going to get you in touch with a side of yourself that you're not like accessing. And that's going to lower threat in your nervous system. Okay? And that really anything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of neuro trainers and stuff out there that I don't want to throw people under the bus, but I know a lot of people in this space, and some of them tend to be very, very like analytical, and kind of like the science becomes their new religion, like kind of a little dogmatic about it. And so anything that seems a little bit pseudoscientific or woo-woo, they dismiss out of hand. I am not like, because my spiritual path has taken me many cool places, and I am, yeah, we can go woo-woo all day. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'll plug another book that is incredible and someone that I really admire. His name is Joe Dispenza. In the book, You Are the Placebo, right? So at the end of the day, if it's masculine, feminine energy, if it's quantum mechanics and the fields and manifestation and visualization that causes it, I don't care, because the outcome is the same.
Yeah. I think that's very true. Having spoken to a number of guests on this podcast who have very niche specialities, that's one thing I've learned, is that if, as long as you believe something strongly and something works for you, then who is someone else to tell you otherwise? Obviously, as long as you're not doing any harm to anyone else, if you found a modality that works for you, great. And I think I always use that as a anchor, that if someone is doing, and I've got personal experience with this too. I've done a lot of below the neck, I like that, modalities, and they weren't working for me. So out of pure desperation, I looked for alternative. I'm doing like air quotes because I don't think they're an alternative really anymore, but it's part of the whole suite therapy modalities, and I've had great successful. But I know some people would look at me like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, well, I'm really happy and I'm really well. So there's something to learn from that.
Right. At the end of the day, that's what matters, right? How you get there is kind of whatever. Doesn't matter, as long as you get the outcome you want. Yeah.
And so obviously you have such an incredible depth of knowledge in terms of neuro training and neuroscience. I'm really keen to learn more about your neuroflow method. Are you able to share sort of what the core pillars are and what session with your method would actually look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a lot about neurotraining. There's kind of like two big pillars of the neuroflow method, and it's neuro and flow. Okay. So the flow state part we mentioned briefly, but that is our optimal state of consciousness where we feel and perform our best, where the neurochemical cocktail that shows up in flow is better than any drug on earth. The flow state itself is actually pretty addicting, right? Which, there is a dark side to that, right? If you sit around and play video games all day, yeah, you'll be in flow for a lot of that time, but is that really moving your life in a positive, progressive direction? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Some people, but some people might use that in a more negative kind of context and it's end up spinning their wheels. So there is that side of it, but that's because that neurochemical cocktail is so powerful, right? And the other things that are kind of showing up in that state that make it so incredible and why, um, actually the University of Sydney did a study on flow states and they found that executives in flow were like 250% more creative for up to 3 days after they had a flow state. So their creative problem solving skills and they were off the charts, right? They were incredible after they had been induced into this flow state. That your productivity goes up 500%, right? Your brainwave patterns actually slow down to almost a meditative state. Yet you get this like effortless kind of focus and attention that totally absorbs you in the present moment. Okay. So think about any time where you have been totally engrossed in the task that you were doing, so much so that everything else goes away. Time starts to change. It will slow way, way, way down sometimes. Like in the case of a car crash, actually. If you've ever been in a car crash, you know what I'm talking about because it slows down like frame by frame. Every moment you remember clear as day. That's flow. It also speeds way up. Like this conversation's almost over already and it's been like a blink, right? Because we're finding a little bit of flow, right? A conversation with an old friend where you drop right in, right where you picked up right where you left off. And then 5 minutes, it seems like it goes by and it's been 2 hours. Or, in sports, we see this. Surfing is an amazing example. It's rich with flow triggers, all the unpredictability, the novelty. It drives focus into the present moment so much so that everything else falls away. Your sense of self actually diminishes. So your self-critic goes quiet, your self-doubt, right? Your inhibition is actually lowered. So we take a little bit more risk in the state, but that actually drives more dopamine into the brain, more focus, more flow. So anyway, long story short, it's an altered state of consciousness where we feel and perform our best. Our peak performance state of mind. All world championships and world records and Olympic gold medals were because of flow states. All the best-selling books of all time, the greatest pieces of art, flow states. So this is a state, if we want to be at our peak performance in anything, then we need to have access to. But we live in a world that is so distracted and in so much pain that it blocks our ability to find flow. So my neuroflow method is all about using the principles of applied neurology as a foundation for chasing flow. Flow is the outcome. I don't care what sport they come to me with. I don't care if they are a corporate athlete and a knowledge worker, a public speaker, whatever. Flow is the outcome that we want. Because when you focus on flow, you're actually focusing on the process, not the outcome. Right? And when you focus on the process, you are in the present moment. You are much less likely to lose motivation if things go wrong. You're less harsh on yourself. And when flow becomes the goal, then the outcome takes care of itself. Right? So that's the reason why flow states are the second pillar. And then neuro is the first. A session. So the neuroflow method is like a full on like 12-week program that walks people from A to Z, or A to Z, as they said. But one session, if I'm working one-on-one with someone, it could be anything, right? We might be doing vision training, um, or vestibular work, right? With in their sport positions or working on skills in their sport. Or we might be doing like integration training for the brain when it gets a little bit out of whack and into this like sensory mismatch area. And so they're doing things like infinity walks and everything else to get the nervous system to a place and the body to a place where it has the capacity to then chase flow, because flow is a very energy demanding state of being. And again, when you're in pain, when you're stuck in anxiety, when you are dealing with all sorts of stress in your life, it blocks your ability to get into flow. So a typical session might be, we first do some of that, quote unquote, nervous system regulation with inhibition tools to turn down parts of the brain, and then some activation tools to turn some other parts up, bring more balance that creates more space. And then we might do some sensory work with their vestibular system and their visual system to get all of the areas of the brain kind of integrated and fully like activated, right? And then we can start to work on specific skills and start to pull different flow triggers. For example, I was working with an athlete just yesterday, came in with some pain. And so we spent the first 10 to 15 minutes dealing with that pain, doing some regulation, doing some inhibition, doing some opposing joints. Once we got rid of that pain, then the nervous system had some more room to work. Then we start ramping things up and activating. Okay. And then we start doing some skill training and working in the flow triggers so that we both can kind of find flow in this session together. Because we know from research done by the Department of Defense in the United States that flow actually enhances learning by up to 490%. So you want to learn a new skill, a new language, anything, find yourself in flow and you will learn that much, much faster. So I want that for my client, because that also means, and the reason that we can learn that much faster is because neuroplasticity, like the brain's ability to change itself, is incredibly heightened in a flow state. So if I want somebody to get out of pain, like if that's my only goal, and then work through those movements or it used to cause them pain while they're not in a pain state because of the endorphins that block and the neuroplasticity that happens, that's going to rewire their brain so much faster than just constantly logging against like an exercise machine, just mindlessly. So the way that we do that is we pull some of these flow triggers. I add some challenge into their exercises. I add in some different cognitive load, right? Where we can move their eyes in specific ways to activate certain areas of the brain and open that up. I can add in a little bit of complexity, like have them, think of their favorite movies and tell me those as they're doing this exercise, right? Which adds a little bit of challenge to it, different layers of brain activation, which just opens the door, because flow sits right on the outside of our current skill level. And that's in anything that we do. So we have to push just beyond our comfort zone to find flow. That's not negotiable. That's called the challenge skills balance. It's the golden rule of flow states. So spoiler alert, that's gonna be like my big tip, because I know you do that at the end of these podcasts, right? Spoiler alert, we're gonna talk about it again because it's that important. If you can tune that, you can find flow in all sorts of areas of your life. Enhance your learning, enhance your speed of processing, get out of your own way, and enjoy the shit out of it while you do it. Right? So I try to incorporate that into every single session, but over the length of the whole program, it's all about like building up the capacity, right? For you to be able to then take all of this knowledge and these tools and then apply that in every area of your life so that you create what's called an autotelic lifestyle or a high flow lifestyle.
You're just blowing my mind in like 50,000 different directions right now. But you touched on one question that I had towards the end there, because typically when I think of flow states, I'm doing a particular task. So whether it's writing or doing some sort of work, or I'm doing a workout. I'm thinking about the listeners of this show, typically really ambitious women who have full lives.
Mhm.
And I know when you were talking to some of this, I was like, how can I find the space or the time or the effort to even think about getting into flow? And I don't want flow in just one area of my life. I want flow in my whole life. What would
Yes.
you say to that sort of person?
Okay. I love this question because this is the primary person that I work with as well. They're high achieving, really like go getting, like badass people, right? And that can become lopsided. This is kind of one of the dark sides of flow. Flow can be very addicting. And when we find it in one area of our life, we tend to go all in on that.
Yes.
And that can be very disruptive, right? And the classic example is the workaholic. And so they become kind of a bliss junkie, right? And they're seeking dopamine all the time, and they get it mostly from their work. So then they sacrifice their relationships and their health chasing flow in their work. Okay. That's a really common thing that I see all the time. So for that person, the first thing we got to do is we got to understand what you're doing. You got to bring some awareness around the flow state and how you're using it as kind of a crutch. Like you're not, okay?
Yeah.
There's worse,
Call it what it is. Yes.
there's worse things to be addicted to, but it's an addiction nonetheless. Like it's causing an addiction. I love Andrew Huberman's description of addiction, right? It's just the narrowing of the things that bring us joy.
Like
Yeah.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that because it describes this person perfectly. It's like all these other things used to bring you joy, but now you only find flow in this thing. And so you're going all in on it. And now you've narrowed the options that you have.
Well,
So what we really need in this scenario is synergistic pursuits that bring us flow in different areas of our life. So for the knowledge worker, the corporate executive, the public speaker, whatever, anybody that's using their brain in their career and finding flow there, the software engineer is a good example, the coder. It's a job that's ripe with flow triggers. And so they finding flow a lot, but they're nerds. Okay. They're
yes.
super nerds.
That's
Like,
the drinking Monster Energy drinks at 6 a.m. They probably haven't seen daylight for weeks. Yes. I know the
I
type.
get it because I'm a super nerd too. And I train actually quite a few of these people because they know what flow is and they love it, right? But they're struggling in other areas of their life. They're burning out. They're having troubles. They're having chronic pain and all this kind of stuff. And so we always have this conversation. It's like, okay, well, now you know that flow is what you're chasing and you're getting it here, and that's great. Burning out because you're slacking off on all your health and your relationships. And in my work, I have what I call the 7 fundamentals for flow, right? That everybody must take care of. They're non-negotiables. That is sleep, exercise, nutrition and hydration, social support, otherwise known as social connection, gratitude, mindfulness, and neurohygiene. 7 things you got to do. And the only negotiable part is how much you need of each of them, because everyone's a little bit individual, but you cannot get away with not doing one of them if you really want to chase peak performance. Okay. So that's kind of one thing that we always start with. But to your question about what this person should do is find that synergy between all their pursuits. So in their health, they need to find flow in their pursuits there. And exercise is the greatest way to do that. It's so easy. Simple, not easy. Okay. Concept, but when you understand the concept and this concept of transient hypofrontality, which means your frontal lobe, your thinking brain shuts off. Okay. That's what happens in a flow state. That's why time gets all weird. That's why our sense of self vanishes, our inner critic, our self-doubt. That's why we get this kind of merging of action and awareness, because the parietal lobe, which is in your frontal lobe, which has all your body maps, and the border of myself and the rest of the universe starts to blur. The surfer feels one with the wave. The violinist is one with her instrument. Even the coder is one with that keyboard. So that all happens because of this idea of transient hypofrontality. The easiest way to get that frontal lobe to shut the F up is to go exercise. You will create a state of exercise-induced transient hypofrontality. Arnie Dietrich from Amsterdam, I think, did some really amazing research on this, if anybody wants to look that up. That is like the non-negotiable, the synergistic pursuit of exercise for flow, because all what I tell my clients is like, I don't even care what kind of exercise you do. All I want for your exercise is you to get to the point where your mind shuts up. That's it. And I mean, this is coming from a strength and conditioning coach, a kinesiologist, and a movement specialist. Like, I've been so deep down the rabbit holes of movement and exercise that it's ridiculous. And then all I'm saying is like, just go do something. Because at the end of the day, for that person, trying to even think about all the training and all the shit that goes along with it can just be overwhelming. So it's like, let's start with the minimum there. That is a synergistic pursuit for your main thing over here. And then the other big part that is massively overlooked in like the big areas of life. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is the guy's name. Do you know who that is? You heard of that?
Heard. Yeah.
He's like the godfather of flow psychology. In his book, I don't remember which book it was. I think it was just the book Flow, the first book he wrote on it. He talks about these three main areas of life: our work, our leisure time, which includes like our hobbies and our health and exercise, and then our maintenance activities. Okay. So those are like the big three areas of life that we should be finding flow in all of them. Okay. So work, that's actually usually the easy one, if the conditions are right. And we can talk about those conditions if we want. We might not have enough time. A deep breath. Health and like leisure activities actually is the top one. This is your hobbies. This is the stuff that you do just for the sake of doing it because you love it. That's like right for flow, right? I play guitar because I love to, right? And I find flow in that pretty easily because over time I've gotten skilled at it and because I just do it because I love to do it. It's autotelic in nature, meaning an end in itself. So the tough one that most people overlook that is ripe for flow is maintenance activities. Here's an example. Do you do dishes?
Yes.
Yeah, they suck, right?
Yes. Last thing I want to be doing. Yes.
The worst. But why is it the worst? It's because you're not present,
Yeah.
right? You're thinking about something else. You'd rather be doing something else. You're thinking about, what your partner said to you earlier that day, or you've got triplets in the other room screaming, right?
Yeah. I was thinking because I do them last thing just before I go to bed, and I'm like, I just want to be in bed. When I do enjoy them, I'm usually listening to a podcast or some music or something else. Yeah.
So that's okay. That's good. Like there are many ways to find flow in that moment. I'm going to bring it back to the challenge skills balance because that's like the golden rule. And what I try to help my clients do is like, if you can apply this rule to everything, you will find flow. And let's apply it to washing dishes. All right. So how would because here's the thing. Flow sits in the middle between challenge and skills. So when the challenge gets too high, we're out of the flow state. Now we're in like anxiety land. It's too.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's too hard. If the challenge is too low and I'm too skilled, like washing dishes, I get bored.
Yeah.
My mind wanders. So how do we find flow in that scenario? We increase the challenge. How do you make washing dishes harder? What I like to do is set a timer.
Yeah. That's a really good idea.
Yeah. It's just that simple. That one little tweak, and now I'm racing myself. I'm competing against.
Yeah.
And I have some little rules, like no food left on the dish, obviously.
Yeah.
Can't break anything. That's automatic disqualification. Right?
You're banned. Lifetime ban from dishes.
Or at least so bad. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
But if you can do that, then kind of what comes out of that? What naturally comes out of that, like competitive nature with yourself and when you're playing with that challenge skills balance?
Like just a sense of achievement. I feel
That
really confident in myself. I feel
yes.
a sense of pride, I guess, but I just feel all around, yeah, good about myself.
And also it becomes more fun.
Yeah, Beth.
You
I
add
do
a
like emotion.
you add a little bit of play into it,
Yeah. Like that's a good one.
right? So that's huge. Like if you ever want to really see what flow states look like, just go watch kids play. They got it figured out. They're in flow a lot. Yeah, they live most of their life in flow. Just totally absorbed in the present moment. It's
And
amazing.
then life kicks it out of them.
It does, right? So Jordan Peterson actually on a recent podcast said the most amazing thing, and I want to repeat it because it just blew me away. And I've heard it in different ways, but he just said it. Said it's such a good way of saying things sometimes. But he basically said like the whole point of life is to remember what it's like to be a child, not to be a child. Because an adult that's like acts like a child is not good.
No, no.
It's to get kicked around by life, get some experience, learn some discipline, and then get back to a childlike state. And to me, that state is flow.
That's so true. I have a 9-month-old who's trying to walk and she's trying to like pull herself up and she falls on her ass. And I'm like, just
All
keep going. It doesn't even base her, think twice about it. She's like, whoop, I'm on my bum. Let's go again. It's just the best sort of thing.
I have 9-month-old triplets.
Yes. Fantastic.
The two of them are there. My son Ben, he's a little, he's just chilling. He's just chilling with his ass right now.
They're
The other
best.
two, the girls are up and yeah, they're doing it. And you're exactly right. It's the greatest example of failure and how it's required for success. And it's like the faster she falls on her ass 100,000 times, the quicker she's going to be walking, running, and doing all the things.
Yeah. And
Children are incredible for that. They're incredible
yeah.
teachers.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we could do a whole nother episode on that good stuff. But I'm mindful of your time as well. You touched on the skills challenge and you provided a really good example with the dishes. I would love for you to share what's a really actionable step revolving around the skills challenge. Maybe you can summarize the framework for that. What's something that the listeners can do in the next 24 to 48 hours with that challenge to help improve their ability to get into a flow state?
Yeah. Awesome. So I do this with a lot of my clients, like first thing when we start talking about flow is I have them do this really simple exercise where you just kind of do a flow audit and you just look at those areas of your life and you get those big three from of work, leisure, and maintenance. And whatever you put into those categories is fine. It doesn't actually matter, but you want to look for those areas where you're not finding flow and the areas where you are. Like look at the areas where you are and maybe do a little audit on like what are the triggers, and you can just search flow triggers if you want. There's 22 and like they're all over the internet. That'd be fine. Or you can look at my Instagram. That's also a good place to go, by the way. But you gotta like do an audit. Like what are the triggers that are really impactful for me? Right. And that can be a way where you can start to just apply those to other areas of life. But just to challenge skills balance, if you look at those three areas and you say like in your leisure time, you have, you play pickleball, you surf, you read books, you whatever, those are great. You probably are finding flow in those already. And they might not need any changing. If you're not finding flow, can you change up or down the challenge level based on where your current skill level is at. Remember, it's right beyond your current skill level. The key is 4%. If you can go 4% above your current skill level, and I know it's a little bit of an arbitrary number, right? But it's just kind of like a guidepost, then you're more likely to find flow. So you look at those areas, you pick out, where am I finding flow, where am I not, and can I up or down this challenge? The ways that you increase or decrease that challenge are very numerous. That you can employ a little creativity. Some of the ways that I do, I want to make it a game as much as I can. So if I can increase challenge and make a game out of it, I'm much more likely to find myself engrossed in the present moment in whatever I'm doing. So things like adding competition. This is why challenges are so great. Like 30-day challenges,
Yeah.
are great because they add a little bit of that accountability and challenge to it. Right. So that would be my advice. Like, look at those areas of your life, look at all the activities that you do in a day and ask yourself, am I finding flow in this? And if I'm not, how can I raise the challenge or bring it down if it's too much and I'm getting like anxious about it?
I love that so much. I'm still mind blown at the fact that, I guess, before coming into the call, flow, and see this interpretation of flow a lot on social media. Flow is something that's easeful and something that's joyful. And I always associated that with something that you're just naturally good at. And so you're in flow when you're doing things that you're good at and enjoy. I never associated flow needing some element of challenge, because that, I guess, requires an additional level of focus and that engrossness in task. But yeah, still
Basically.
mind blown. I mean, there's lots of knowledge bombs throughout this. I've got a whole page. In fact, I've just scrolled down. So I know that listeners will also get a lot from this. So thank you so much, Brandon, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. If the listeners are keen to learn more about the work that you do and stalk you on Instagram, where can they do that?
Yeah. So my Instagram is at I am Brandon Day. Just one word. I am Brandon Day. And in there, you can find links to my free school community called the NeuroFlow Performance Lab, where there's a boatload of free resources on flow states and neurotraining to get yourself out of pain. And really, I mean, you could go through that all on your own and find yourself in flow pretty easily. So yeah, those are my two spots.
Amazing. And I'll put those details in the show notes. But thank you again, Brandon, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope this was helpful. If you thought of someone while listening to this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could share this episode with them. While you're doing that, please also take a moment to leave a review on the podcast if you haven't yet already. It takes less than a minute and it means so much to me and helps this podcast to reach more people just like you. Thank you so much for that, and I'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, go out and achieve every dream you have, because actually, you can.